SEC coaches wanting to avoid the conference title game. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll get you caught up with some SEC injury updates heading into Week 13. Also, we'll get into some comments from Lane Kiffin saying that SEC coaches out there want to avoid the SEC championship game. We will discuss. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. All right, we're going to dive into it. Let's go around the conference. We got some injuries to discuss.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
We start over at Alabama as Kalen DeBoer talking with reporters on Monday, revealing that sophomore safety Keon Sabb is going to miss the remainder of the season for Alabama. He suffered that injury a couple weeks ago against Tennessee, and at first they said they were hopeful that he would return at some point later in the year, but apparently that's no longer an option. Sabb is having season-ending surgery on a lower body injury. He was a safety at Michigan, won the national championship with them last year, beating Alabama in the playoff, and then transferred to Tuscaloosa this offseason, finished this year with 39 tackles, 4 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. Now, DeBoer did tell reporters that he'll, quote, be ready to roll for next season. So you got to assume that Keon Sabb's going to stick it out there at Alabama, not transfer elsewhere. But Alabama did turn to Bray Hubbard in the absence of Sabb, and he has progressed as a starter, had an interception during Alabama's win against Mizzou, and had a few tackles this past week against Mercer. Tide will finish off this season with Oklahoma and Norman before coming home to host Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Over at Texas A&M, Mike Elko revealing Monday that wide receiver Cyrus Allen suffered an arm injury in A&M's game this past weekend, and he will miss the rest of this season, require arm surgery. He had 1 catch for 9 yards on Saturday, finishes this year with 18 catches, almost 300 yards and a touchdown. So Cyrus Allen, wish him the best of luck. He was second on the team with 190 pass snaps so far this season, behind only Noah Thomas with 240. Over in South Carolina, they will lose tight end Brady Hunt. He will miss the next 2 games with a lower leg injury. It was a non-contact injury, but he caught 2 passes this year for 22 yards. Frequently used as a run blocker a lot, as Shane Beamer uses 2 tight end sets. But with Brady Hunt done for the year, the tight end room getting a little thin there for South Carolina. Josh Simon, obviously their starter, but true freshman Michael Smith and special teamer Maurice Brown likely going to step up and play bigger roles there. Over at Georgia, the Bulldogs without several key offensive players. Kirby Smart hoping to get them back on Monday. He gave an update on wide receiver Dillon Bell. Well, not really an update. He said, no update on Dillon, really. I just ran into him a few minutes ago. Got an ankle sprain. It's stable, not going to require any sort of surgery. He was knocked out of the Tennessee game this past week with that ankle injury. Wasn't able to return to the game. He took a handoff from Carson Beck. Did have 2 catches for 12 yards prior to the injuries. But good, that doesn't sound like he's done for the year, so we'll keep an eye on Dillon Bell when he will return. Now, running back Trevor Etienne, he did not play at all this past week against Tennessee. He was injured against Florida, but returned the next week to play in a limited role against Ole Miss. Kirby Smart saying we are hoping to get him back. That's what I can tell you. Ribs are a painful injury. Don't know if that's the exact term, but he does have a rib injury, and we hope to get him back soon. So keep an eye on that. Trevor Etienne, Georgia's leading rusher this year. Nate Frazier, a freshman, did a good job in his absence this past week. Over at Florida, freshman quarterback DJ Lagway returned back to action this past week after dealing with that hamstring injury and missing a little bit of time. He wasn't 100%. Billy Napier, talking with the media on Monday, said, well, I think he didn't miss a rep with the first unit last week, so we'll take the same approach this week. I think the soft tissue injury was a very subjective, so we got every gadget you can imagine downstairs. I think we're using all that data and all those metrics to make decisions to try to put him in the position to be the healthiest he can be. But listing him as day-to-day, saying he's not 100%, but said he did not have a setback in the win over LSU, and he said, I think he feels a little bit better at this point in the week than he did last week. So we'll keep an eye on that with DJ Lagway, big one against Ole Miss coming up this week. And speaking of Ole Miss, LSU transfer running back Logan Diggs could make his Ole Miss debut this week at Florida. Lane Kiffin, revealing to the media on Monday, said, quote, he's done the most he's done all season this past week. Kiffin also saying he expects wide receiver Trey Harris to be ready to go for this game against Florida. Also noted J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan have not been playing 100% as of late. One other Ole Miss note here, cornerback Jackson Jones entered the NCAA transfer portal according to On3 Sports. He was a non-scholarship player who came in via the transfer portal in January of 2023, participated in spring drills, but Jackson Jones on the move. Over at Oklahoma, they will have a big decision to make this offseason in hiring a new offensive coordinator. Of course, they dismissed Seth Luttrell several weeks ago. Joe John Finley was the co-OC. He took over as interim OC. Kevin Johns, who was also on the staff as an analyst, coaching the quarterbacks. Now, neither is expected to remain in those roles going forward. Who will Oklahoma hire as their OC? Well, just some names to keep an eye on. Brennan Marion is the OC and quarterbacks coach at UNLV. He was a guy they inquired about when Jeff Lebby left last year. Over at Indiana, their co-OC is Mike Shanahan. They want to take a look there. Zach Kitley, the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Texas Tech. Another name to keep an eye on, Dan Mullen's name popping up. Dusty Dvorak was throwing that name out there on the ESPN broadcast. And then one other to keep an eye on, Tom Herman was just fired as FAU head coach yesterday. And there are some reports that he may look to take a job as an OC at a power program. That would be very interesting. With Tom Herman go to Oklahoma as the OC. Speaking of Oklahoma, running back Xavier Robinson was set to redshirt this season for the Sooners. He's played in 4 games. However, with 2 games left, he was approached by Brent Venables and running backs coach DeMarco Murray and was asked to play in the team's final 2 games, and he agreed. He will forego his redshirt this year. He'll burn that to get more playing time. Through week 12, he's carried the ball 15 times for 85 yards with a touchdown, also had 4 catches for 65 yards. So look to see what he does. Oklahoma's leading rusher Javante Barnes sprained his ankle against Maine and was unable to play this past week. Over at LSU, Brian Kelly's Tigers coming off that frustrating loss to Florida, and there was a camera caught a spat between he and a couple of his wide receivers on the sideline on Saturday, one with Chris Hilton and one with Kyron Lacey. Paul Feinbaum asked him about the incident on the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday. According to Brian Kelly, he said Lacey was yelling because he wanted the football. He said, look, I love that about our players. Any competitor wants the football. You have to be able to measure it by making sure the emotion doesn't take over what you're trying to accomplish. Said clearly in this instance, we've done too many good things in building this football program that we are not going to panic. We're going to stick with our process. We're going to get better at the things that we do. By the way, LSU will wear gold jerseys this weekend as they host Vanderbilt in Baton Rouge. Over at Texas, Steve Sarkisian was asked about Quinn Ewers possibly playing in his final game in Austin this weekend as they host Kentucky. Steve Sarkisian saying, quote, no idea. He did not go on to explain if he and Ewers have had discussions about his future, didn't add any extra context. Quinn Ewers in his 3rd season at Texas, his 4th season of college football overall. Remember, he went over to Ohio State to start his career and got a car or something like that. But we'll see. A lot of people expecting Quinn Ewers to move on after this year. Arch Manning obviously waiting in the wings. So that'll be something worth keeping an eye on. Over at Tennessee, Josh Heupel they are licking their wounds after their loss at Georgia, and Heupel said they are focused on turning the page after the loss to Georgia. Tennessee, of course, still has a shot at the college football playoff. Heupel said it's all about controlling what they can control moving forward. It's time to further invest and take that next step. Keep an eye on Tennessee. And lastly, over at Auburn, Hugh Freeze saying he's very thankful to freshman linebacker DeMarcus Riddick, the former four-star prospect. Had a big impact on Auburn's defense the last couple weeks. Freeze said on Monday, we changed when we started playing him. Not that others weren't playing well in spots, but without someone that has the ability that can run and tackle these dual threat guys in the open field, it's a problem. We had that problem all last year and part of this year. And DeMarcus Riddick has made a difference in that because he has length and he can run. Riddick earned his first career start on Saturday against Louisiana Monroe. He will try to slow down A&M quarterback Marcel Reed coming up this weekend. Should be a good one. A lot of people already putting A&M possibly on upset alerts against Auburn. It's a night game. Jordan Harry, you never know. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Coming up next, comments from Lane Kiffin. Are SEC coaches wanting to avoid the SEC championship game? We'll discuss that here in just a sec. First, I want to remind you guys today's episode presented to you by our friends over at Roy. And SEC fans, listen up. You need to go download the Roy app. You've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they're revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets NIL money. And here's what we absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. Roy is helping us keep our teams intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. You can show your support for your favorite SEC player by depositing a little appreciation onto the player's account. To do that, download the Roy app. You can see what the logo looks like if you're watching on YouTube, or go to joinroy.com. Let's spotlight our Roy Locked On Player of the Week. This week it is South Carolina quarterback Lenora Sellers. He had a fantastic game in the win over Missouri. So we're going to throw some money into his account on Roy. Every contribution counts, $10, $20. It all adds up, and it's going to help your favorite players stay put. Join us and show some love for Lenora Sellers. Go download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players and change the game. Today's episode also presented by the Game Time app. And Game Time, we'll be telling you guys, has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. They filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks. Check it out. The curation process is going to make it easier for you to save on sporting events. They're all in pricing feature. I like that one. You could turn it on. It's a feature you have to toggle on. It'll show you your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And then, of course, the seat views option. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. If you've never used them before, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. Roll along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, we want to jump into this. The SEC championship game. If the college football playoff were to begin today, no conference that have more teams in the field of 12 than the SEC. Of course, the Big Ten knocking on the door, but the race to play in the SEC title game is as close as it has been in some time. And that's what I wanted to take a look at first. The SEC standing, saw this on, if you were watching one of the games on Saturday night, but ABC put up this graphic at the end of the games. Top six, as it stands right now, Texas is sitting there at 5-1, along with Texas A&M. They both play each other next week. So one of those teams is going to take a second loss. The other team could potentially head to Atlanta with the one loss. Now, we just mentioned A&M's got a tough one on the road at Auburn this weekend. Texas is at home. They host Kentucky, but keep in mind Kentucky has played ranked teams a little bit tougher at times. So we'll see what kind of battle Kentucky gives Texas and what kind of battle Auburn gives A&M. But I think all things considered, we think the winner of that game next week feels pretty good about it, right? The winner of Texas A&M has a pretty good chance to go to Atlanta. And then what do you do with the whole jumbled mess? Georgia is done with their SEC schedule. Tennessee, so Georgia's 6-2. Tennessee is 5-2. They still have the road trip at Vandy in their season finale. So if they win that one, they'll be 6-2. Of course, Georgia has the head-to-head over Tennessee. And then you got Alabama and Ole Miss both sitting there at 4-2, both with 2 conference games apiece to finish things out. Ole Miss is at Florida, and then they get the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. Alabama, they are at Oklahoma, and then they get Auburn at home in the Iron Bowl. So good chances for both of those teams to win out and finish 6-2. The crazy part here would be, just say hypothetical, let's say A&M loses versus Auburn at Auburn this Saturday night. Not crazy to think. Texas handles Kentucky, but then next week in College Station, A&M beats Texas. Then you would have a 6-way tie of teams that are 6-2. A lot of different scenarios here. You go down the tiebreaker list. First one is head-to-head. Well, you can't really do that one because everybody's beating everybody, right? I think I talked about this on the show yesterday. It's like Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama. Ole Miss, they beat Georgia. I mean, it's just a jumbled mess. But Lane Kiffin talking with the media on Monday, he was saying, look, it's not as attractive to play in the SEC championship game anymore with the 12-team playoff. Of course, if you win the SEC championship, you can get in with, first round bye, and that would be big. It's one less game you have to play in the playoff. But here's what Lane Kiffin said. Lane Kiffin on Monday said, look, I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that they don't want to be in it. He said, the reward to get a bye in the playoff versus the risk to get knocked out completely, I mean, that's a pretty big risk. And it's a great point, too. We've been talking about this for weeks about, let's just say you're a 10-2 team that goes to Atlanta and you lose in the SEC championship game. You take a third loss, you're 10-3. Are you out of the playoff? Especially with multiple other 10-2 SEC teams on the outside looking in. I've had some people say, the loser of the SEC title game is in no matter what, because you're the second best team in the SEC, so clearly you deserve to be in. But I don't know. You go back and look last year, Georgia was undefeated, lost by a touchdown to Alabama in the SEC championship game, and they dropped Georgia out of the top 4. They dropped them completely out of the 14 playoff. So who's to say a 10-2 SEC team loses in the SEC championship game, drops to 10-3? Who's to say that one of those other 10-2 teams sitting out there, having not played on conference championship weekend, doesn't jump them and get a spot into the playoff? Kiffin went on to say, I think it has ended up being a very unique situation of all postseason sports, the way that the system is set up here. How you could go to the SEC championship and get knocked out of the college football playoff race, but if you don't go to the SEC title game, you're in. Look, we've seen that with Alabama in the past, right? Like Alabama has made the playoff, having not played for the SEC championship, going, look, we're one of the sexiest teams sitting out here. Yeah, we didn't play for Atlanta, but play for a title in Atlanta, but look, we looked very attractive. Like Kiffin went on to say, very different from a lot of these other conferences. Kiffin did agree. It's no secret that the current conference championship model is diluting the meaning of wanting to play for an SEC title. He said, look, there's a cost and benefit to everything. There's great benefits to this playoff system and so many people being excited and fans and programs and more games. And then there's costs. The conference championships just don't mean as much. He said, it's not just do you potentially get knocked out by losing, do you have more injuries? So you're going to go get more injuries, play another game to get a bye, but then the other people are having their bye while you're playing in the SEC title game. So I think that's why, I'll go on record saying this, why a lot of coaches, or some coaches I've talked to, don't want to go to the SEC championship game. It's a great point, too. I mean, let's say Texas beats A&M, and Texas is the number 1 team in Atlanta. and let's say Ole Miss is the second team. Again, putting tiebreakers and all that aside, I don't know. However, Ole Miss gets in it. And let's say they go to Atlanta and they lose a close one with Georgia, and late in that game, or against Texas, and late in that game, Jackson Dart gets hurt. I mean, that's catastrophic. Ole Miss and everything they've worked for all year, yeah, a chance at more injuries. So we'll see what happens. Again, 6 SEC teams, Ole Miss, Texas, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee all have a legitimate path to the college football playoff. And one of those teams will make the SEC championship game and also might make the college football playoff. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Now, one other note over at Alabama, Kalen DeBoer and his team, they're righting their wrongs from earlier in the season. Tyler Booker on that offensive line makes a weekly appearance with the guys on the Next Round podcast. And yesterday he said they don't want to miss that SEC championship. He said that the Tide definitely want to play in Atlanta. Booker saying there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Alabama wants to be in the SEC championship game. And when we get there, we want to win it. Booker mentioned that in Alabama's indoor practice facility, there are 2 numbers on the wall. One number is the team's national championship total, and the other is the team's SEC championship total. Said he wants to add another number to the wall by winning in Atlanta once again. So, look, some folks want to get there. Some folks want to be there, but I understand the hesitation for some saying, chance of another loss, maybe get knocked out of this thing altogether. I get it. So, there's some risk involved there. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Quick message here for you guys. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I am not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, we called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time you spent on hold waiting to break up with your old phone provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you will see right now all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigs on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC. A few more tidbits of things to get to before we call it a show. And first off, we got our SEC Week 12 Players of the Week. And, man, it was a riveting week of play. And first one, we got to start off with Lenore Sellers. Fantastic performance by him this past week in the win over Mizzou. Threw for 353 yards, 5 touchdowns in the win. Also ran for 45 yards. Rushing, Lenore Sellers named SEC Offensive Player of the Week. Florida linebacker Shamar James and Texas DB Jahdae Brown shared the Defensive Player of the Week award. Shamar James had 11 tackles, 5 solo, 2 sacks in the win over LSU. Jahdae Brown had 7 tackles, a sack, and an interception. Florida kicker Trey Smack and Georgia's Brett Thorson shared Special Teams Player of the Week. Texas's Hayden Connor and Georgia's Tate Ratledge were named Co-Offensive Lineman of the Week. Welcome back, Tate Ratledge. Good to have him back here after missing several weeks. Texas' Alfred Collins, he was named Defensive Lineman of the Week with 7 tackles and a sack in their road win over Arkansas. And Florida quarterback DJ Lagway was named Freshman of the Week in the win over LSU. Also, Carson Beck, he was honored this past week being named the Reese's Senior Bowl Offensive Player of the Week. Dissecting Tennessee, going 25 of 40 for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. That's the big one after he had been turn it over a whole lot here in recent weeks. One other note here, we got our SEC Week 14 time, so this is going to be for the final week of the regular season, and this will be next week. We will get games on 11/29, which that'll be that Friday, and then games on the 30th. So here's how it shakes out. On the 11/29, we will have Mississippi State at Ole Miss. That'll be 2:30 Central on ABC. And then into the evening, Georgia Tech at Georgia. That'll be 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. So those are the 2 Friday games. Then we get into the Saturday slate. It will be Tennessee at Vanderbilt will be the early one, 11 a.m. Central on ABC. South Carolina at Clemson will be at 11 a.m. Central on ESPN. So those are 2 good ones in the early slate. Louisville at Kentucky. That one will be at 11 a.m. Central on the SEC Network. Into the afternoon, you'll have Auburn and Alabama. The Iron Bowl will be 2:30 Central on ABC. Arkansas at Mizzou will be 2:30 Central on SEC Network. I almost don't like all these games being on at the same time. Wish we could spread them out a little bit more. And then into the evening, you get Oklahoma at LSU. That'll be at 6 p.m. Central on ESPN in Death Valley. Florida at Florida State will be at either 6 or 6:30 Central on ESPN2. And then on ABC, the big one, it is Texas at Texas A&M. 6:30 Central kickoff out there in College Station. I almost feel like we had to move that one to just, can we move that to like Sunday night or Monday night? Like just put it on its own island as its own game. That is going to be a massive one. All right, before we get out of here, just a couple recruiting tidbits here. Florida, they added a big piece to their recruiting class on Monday, picking up a commitment from 3-star defensive lineman Stephon Shivers. Was previously committed to Georgia. Good pickup for the Gators. The number 489 overall player, the number 52 defensive lineman out of the state of Tennessee, 6'5", 365 pounds. Gators also flipped an in-state recruit, quarterback prospect Tramel Jones Jr., a 4-star prospect, the number 21 quarterback in this class of 2025. He was committed to Florida State, but he tweeted out, only Gators get out alive, he said in his announcement. And big time get. He decommitted from Florida State, who has been struggling this year. He was in attendance for Florida's win over LSU and announced his commitment to Billy Napier and the Gators. So big pickup there for Billy Napier. And then over to Alabama. Monday night, Kalen DeBoer and company picking up a commitment for the class of 2025, flipping 4-star defensive back Ivan Taylor away from Michigan. He announced the news on social media saying, happy to announce my commitment to the University of Alabama. Blessed for the opportunity. Look forward to playing for Coach DeBoer and the staff. Roll Tide. He's rated as the number 7 safety, the number 9 player out of the state of Florida, and the number 59 overall prospect in the class of 2025. So some recruiting news here as National Signing Day is coming up very quickly here. Hey, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. We'll have some guests joining us later in the week. You definitely want to check that out. Hey, for your second listen, check out some of our other great podcasts. Brandon Olson doing Locked On Gators. Does a great job covering all things Florida and all our other SEC teams. Whatever your favorite SEC team is, just search Locked On and that team, and you'll find it wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.